We are the dreamers of dreams.
Hello folks, my name is Mr. Wonka, and welcome to the Let's Play for Arcade Tonic. So Arcade Tonic started out in 2018, and at the time I was working at Dave & Buster's as a game tech, and so I was repairing games. And so I started on this project, and it was based off of a video that LGR made talking about coin pushers. And so the coin pusher in this was actually the first one that I developed. And so my work at Dave & Buster's did not go well, and they treated me very poorly, and there was a lot of harassment and such. And so, so even though I started work in 2018, a couple months afterwards, I eventually just stopped working on it altogether. And yeah, and it's built using the Construct 3 engine. And it was, as you may have guessed, it was originally built to be a mobile game, which is confusing since it's on Kongregate and it's running on HTML5. But let me go over to the coin pusher now. Yeah, so my original intent was that this would be a free-to-play game with ads, and then you would be able to watch ads to earn more coins. And when I was developing it, I actually had my family and friends and complete strangers as well test out the game, and so in total I probably had 10 to 15 people play the game, and then the people that were part of my beta program would actually report bugs to me, and then I would fix them. And so most all of the assets I created, or they're from a store. And then all the programming was done by me. And then another thing that I really wanted to do was to have upgrades with the games. And so as you can see, we can purchase the big coin here, and then that unlocks it. And now if we go back, now I think it's every 1 in 3 chance that there will be a big coin, and it's worth extra. And so the original idea was that once you run out of tokens, then you would either have to wait or watch an ad, and then you could purchase like token packs or something like that. But in this version, the tokens just regenerate automatically very quickly. And there are no ads other than congregates that they place before it, and I earned some kickback on that, but it's relatively nothing. So, funny story about this game, the air hockey. In the original version of this, when I was doing the AI, the first iteration was literally impossible to beat because the enemy AI would constantly and perfectly track the puck, and so literally it would always stop it. So you couldn't win. So what I had to wind up doing was, oh, that's a bug. Alrighty. Was the AI accelerates towards the puck, and so if it's already heading in a direction, then it takes it a moment, like you just saw there, to go and accelerate in the opposite direction. And one thing that I learned when I was working at Dave & Buster's is all of the games there are all rigged, most all of them. And that was not something I wanted to do with my game. I didn't want this to be like a scummy free-to-play game where it was constantly begging for money, even though it kind of would be. But I wanted the games themselves to be fun and fair. And then this one was probably the hardest to program, because it uses actual randomization with the red arrows. And then also the physics engine, which is, I want to say, Box 2D, is just incredibly whiny about how the physics are done. And then I even added this like display mode where it goes and it cycles through the different possible options. And so with this game, it actually uses the ball's height to determine where it is on the playing field. So as the ball goes higher, it must be, that's how it determines what arrow it's hit. Wow, that was garbage. And then each one has a little question mark thing. So the reason that this never got released on mobile as I originally intended was, and I had actually bought the license to release it on Google Play Store and Microsoft Store. And for a while, you could actually get my Rolling Marble Clock on the Google Play Store, and you still can get it from the Microsoft Store. The only difference between the online one and the store version is that the online one has ads on the page. By getting the in-app purchases to work and the ads with Construct 3, the process of getting it to work was just a nightmare. And so, yeah. And the documentation on Construct 3 is very hit and miss. And so I just wound up giving up on it because I couldn't get it to work. But with the Kongregate transition, the one nice thing is that I'm able to have the leaderboard like here, so it automatically submits scores if the person is logged in. And actually, so in the first release of this, some of the games were bugged, and so people were getting impossibly high scores on the games. So I wound up having to reset the leaderboards, and I think that I released 2 more updates fixing bugs after the release. And there were a lot of bugs that I had to fix during the development process as people were testing it. And so, like, at one point in this game, sometimes the boat would just randomly fly off the screen. And then sometimes also when it went to reset, the boat would not come to a full stop after here, and it would continue rocking back and forth. And then there's also a purchase for the Factory Catastrophe where it adds a golden one, and then another one for the coin pusher where it gets rid of the chasms on the side. So, one thing I learned as part of the testing process was about player incentive. And what I mean by that is, after playing the games, quite a few people told me that they didn't really feel very accomplished. And so what I did was I added this little flying ticket thing every time you get points from the game. And after I did that, people felt like that what they were doing was a lot more accomplished because they were able to see the little graphic for it. This one is rather difficult, and I had to go through a couple iterations about how the wheel worked because I didn't want it to be where you could just use the same timing every time. And so I think what I wound up doing is the wheel slows down, and the amount of time that it slows down is randomized between a couple, between like 1 second and 2 seconds or something like that. And so that way you can't just, get into a rhythm. And it's a lot more fair than the real-life counterpart, whereas the real version of this, or a comparable one anyway, those will actually, if they are not set to pay out yet, they will not allow you to get the highest value, like the jackpot, or, you know, move up to the next level. And, you know, I just felt like that was incredibly unfair, that the game was actually stopping you versus having a randomized aspect of it. And then this is probably my favorite game in the whole collection. And so, and then I was really happy that I was able to get that little crane animation of it going all the way over. Oh, and that was another thing, was sound effects. So like, if you get a jackpot, then it plays a special sound that you just heard. And so, having the crane just go back and forth was a really interesting task, because the crane itself is not actually holding the ball. That's all one asset, because if it were to do that, then the ball would be bouncing around like mad inside the crane because of the collision. And so instead, when you click to drop it, it actually changes the asset and then spawns a ball right where you see it. And then it moves as far right as it can until it hits a certain spot, a certain coordinate, and then it stops. And then, just like the real life counterpart, the pegs are set up so that way getting the 100 is a lot less likely in comparison to the other values, and also the 100 is a lot narrower of a value compared to the others, and it's also taller, so the marble will be more likely. So this one is actually closest to its real life counterpart in that neither of them are rigged, but it's made against you. This one tends to be especially difficult for people, and so as the game goes on, the speed ramps up and it gets more and more difficult. And originally I would just have the balls go and respawn at the top, but what wound up happening was sometimes the balls, with them all spawning at the same place, like I mentioned earlier, the physics collide with each other and that causes things to explode. And so you'd have balls raining down because they were colliding. And so what I wound up doing is when they go off screen, they just get deleted. And then this keeps on spawning for as long as it can. Once the balls get stuck at the top coordinate, then it stops spawning them. And so that way you don't get an explosion of marbles going everywhere. And then it determines that it's in the bucket just because it was able to go off screen. But, yeah. So that's about it for Arcade Tonic. Bye for now from Mr. Wonka.